I'm Amber Wilson, 27, and cars have been my passion since I could walk. For years, I saved every penny for my dream, a 1967 Ford Mustang that I lovingly restored with my own hands. Then, during a business trip, my parents sold my precious car to pay for my sister Taylor's college tuition. They gave away my dream without even asking. When I discovered what they'd done, my world shattered. Before I tell you how I made my sister pay for every penny of my dream car, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had something precious taken from you. My love for cars wasn't just a passing interest, it was woven into my DNA. My grandfather, Harold Wilson, was a mechanic for over 40 years. Some of my earliest memories are of standing on a milk crate in his garage, handing him tools while he explained how engines worked. While other little girls got dolls for their birthdays, I begged for model cars and mechanics' tool sets. By age 12, I could identify most car makes and models just by the sound of their engines. Grandpa Harold always said I had motor oil running through my veins instead of blood. My parents, Linda and Michael Wilson, never quite understood my obsession. Mom was an elementary school teacher who preferred books to engines, and Dad worked in finance. Numbers were his thing, not horsepower. They supported my interest in cars but always with a slight confusion, as if waiting for me to grow out of it and develop more appropriate interests. I never did. My younger sister Taylor, on the other hand, was the perfect daughter in their eyes. 3 years younger than me, she was artistic, social, and conventionally feminine. Where I spent weekends covered in grease under a car hood, Taylor was at dance recitals or art classes. Don't get me wrong, I loved my sister. We shared secrets, borrowed each other's clothes, when I wasn't in my mechanic's overalls, and defended each other against school bullies. But there was always an underlying current of competition between us, fueled by our parents' unconscious favoritism. Growing up in our middle-class suburb of Indianapolis wasn't easy for a girl obsessed with muscle cars. We weren't poor, but we weren't wealthy either. Dad's accountant salary and Mom's teacher income meant that luxuries had to be earned. From age 15, I worked after school at the local grocery store, saving every dollar. When other teens spent their money on movies and mall trips, mine went into a special savings account labeled Dream Car. After high school, I pursued mechanical engineering at Purdue University, working part-time at an auto shop to help pay tuition and continue building my car fund. Those were grueling years, studying until dawn, working weekends, and still trying to maintain some semblance of a social life. But I had a vision that kept me going. Taylor, meanwhile, seemed to float through life on a cloud of parental support. When she decided to switch majors 3 times in her first year of college, my parents covered the extra costs without complaint. When she wanted to spend a semester abroad in Paris to find her artistic voice, they dipped into their retirement savings. It wasn't that they wouldn't have done the same for me, it's that I never asked. Pride and independence were my hallmarks, sometimes to a fault. After college, I landed a position as an automotive engineer at a respected firm in Indianapolis. My starting salary was decent, but more importantly, I could finally accelerate my savings plan. For 2 years, I lived in a tiny studio apartment, drove a practical used Honda, and limited my social spending. My colleagues thought I was either incredibly frugal or secretly paying off massive debt. In reality, I was inching closer to my dream. When I finally had $24,000 saved up, I began hunting for my perfect Mustang. It took 6 months of searching, but I finally found her at a specialty auction in Kentucky, a 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback in Highland Green. She was in rough shape, with rusted floors and an engine that barely turned over, but her bones were good. I negotiated the price down to $22,500 and drove her home on a trailer, nearly crying with joy the entire 3-hour journey. For the next year, every free moment was spent restoring my baby. I rebuilt the engine myself, replaced the floor pans, restored the original interior, and finally had her repainted in her original color. All told, I invested another $9,000 in parts and specialty work I couldn't do myself. When she was finished, she was magnificent, a perfect blend of classic muscle car heritage and reliable modern upgrades that made her actually drivable in everyday conditions. The Mustang wasn't just a car to me. She represented everything I had worked for. My independence, my skill, my determination to make my own way without handouts. I named her Shelby, after Carroll Shelby, the legendary automotive designer. Every time I turned her key and heard that engine roar to life, a sense of accomplishment washed over me like nothing else. During this time, Taylor had graduated with an art history degree and was struggling to find stable employment. She'd work at a gallery for a few months, then quit because it wasn't fulfilling, or get let go because she repeatedly showed up late. When her rent came due, she'd call our parents. When her car broke down, Dad would pay for repairs. The pattern was clear to everyone except perhaps Taylor herself. She expected bailouts. I tried talking to my parents about enabling her behavior, but they always defended her. "She's finding herself," Mom would say. "Not everyone knows their path as clearly as you do, Amber." Dad would add, "We're just helping her until she gets on her feet." It had been 3 years since her graduation, and those feet seemed permanently hovering above ground. Despite these tensions, we maintained a relatively peaceful family dynamic. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were a weekly tradition, and Taylor and I still shared sister days once a month, usually shopping or seeing a movie. I kept my frustrations mostly to myself, focusing instead on my growing career and my beloved Mustang. Little did I know that the car that had come to symbolize my independence would soon become the catalyst for the biggest family crisis we had ever faced. March 2023 marked a major milestone in my career. After 5 years at Johnson Automotive Engineering, I was selected to present our new eco-friendly engine design at the International Auto Innovation Conference in Detroit. This wasn't just any presentation, it was a potential game-changer for my career. If well received, I'd be first in line for the project manager position opening up in the fall, complete with a substantial salary increase and my own team. "This could be huge, Shelby," I said to my car the night before my trip, as I polished her dashboard one last time. I had a habit of talking to her when I was excited or nervous. 5 days in Detroit with the biggest names in automotive engineering. When we come back, things might be very different. I'd arranged for my parents to check on my apartment and the Mustang while I was gone. Though I lived only 20 minutes from their house, the Mustang was parked in my building's secure garage, accessible only with a key fob. I'd left them my spare key and detailed instructions on starting her up and letting her run for a few minutes every couple of days. Classic cars don't like sitting idle. "Remember, Dad," I'd explained, handing over my precious keys, "she needs to be turned over regularly. Just let her idle for about 5 minutes, then shut her down. And please, don't take her out on the road. The insurance situation is complicated." "Amber, I'm not a complete car novice," Dad had said with mild offense. "I've been driving since before you were born." I know. She's special to me." Mom had patted my shoulder. "We understand, honey. Your car will be fine. Focus on wowing those engineers in Detroit." The conference started brilliantly. My presentation on the second day was met with enthusiastic questions and business cards from industry leaders. 2 automotive publications asked for interviews, and the head of R&D at a major manufacturer hinted at potential collaboration opportunities. I was flying high, networking during the day and revising my career goals at night in my hotel room. Each evening, I called home to check in. The first 2 nights, my parents answered cheerfully, assuring me everything was fine. On the 3rd night, though, something felt off. "How's Shelby doing?" I asked, as had become my custom. "The car?" "Oh, it's fine," Mom replied, her voice slightly higher than normal. "Did Dad remember to start her up today?" "I'm sure he did. You know your father follows instructions to the letter." Something in her tone made me uneasy. "Can you put him on?" "He's actually out right now. Running errands." "At 9:30 at night?" "We needed milk." The conversation continued awkwardly for a few more minutes before Mom suddenly remembered she had laundry to fold. I hung up feeling uneasy but told myself I was being paranoid. They were probably just tired of my obsessive car checking. On the fourth day of the conference, Taylor called me, an unusual occurrence, as she typically preferred texting. "Hey sis, killing it at the car nerd convention?" Her voice had that forced brightness I recognized from whenever she wanted something. "It's going really well." "What's up? You never call. Can't a girl just check on her successful big sister?" She laughed nervously. "So, I was thinking about stopping by your place to borrow that black cocktail dress of yours. I have a gallery opening tomorrow night. The keys are with Mom and Dad. You'd need to get them to let you in." "Right. Of course. I'll do that." She paused. "So, your car's in the garage, right? Not on the street or anything?" My stomach tightened. "Yes, Taylor. Why are you asking about my car?" "No reason. Just making conversation. Anyway, gotta go. Good luck with your presentation." She hung up before I could respond. Now I was definitely worried. I tried calling my parents back immediately, but the call went to voicemail. I sent a text, "Is everything okay with Shelby?" Taylor was asking weird questions. "Please call me back ASAP." No response came that night. The next morning, distracted and concerned, I fumbled through my final networking session and caught an earlier flight home than planned, cutting the conference short by half a day. A nagging sense of dread followed me the entire journey from Detroit to Indianapolis. When my Uber pulled up to my apartment building at 4:30 p.m., I rushed inside and down to the garage level, nearly dropping my suitcase in my haste. I rounded the corner to my parking space and stopped dead. The space was empty. My beautiful Highland green 1967 Mustang Fastback, my pride, my joy, my Shelby, was gone. My first thought was theft, but the secure garage made that unlikely. With shaking hands, I called my father. "Dad, the car is gone. Someone stole Shelby." A heavy silence filled the line before he spoke. "Amber, you need to come over to the house. Right now." "What?" "No, I need to call the police. My car is." "The car wasn't stolen, Amber," he interrupted, his voice strained. "Please, just come to the house. We need to talk." The 15-minute drive to my parents' home was a blur. My mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. When I arrived, both my parents' cars were in the driveway, along with Taylor's beat-up Corolla. I barely put my car in park before jumping out and rushing to the front door. Inside, they were waiting in the living room, Mom perched nervously on the edge of the sofa, Dad standing by the fireplace, and Taylor slouched in the armchair, examining her fingernails as if they were the most interesting things in the world. "Where's my car?" I demanded without preamble. Mom started to speak, but Dad stepped forward. "Amber, please sit down." "I don't want to sit down." "Where's my car?" Dad took a deep breath. "We sold it." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually staggered backward. "You what?" "We sold your car," he repeated, his voice firmer but eyes unable to meet mine. "Taylor had an emergency situation with her tuition for her master's program and we." "You sold my car?" I was screaming now, unable to process what I was hearing. "You had no right. That was my car. I paid for it. I restored it." Mom jumped in, tears in her eyes. "Honey, please understand. Taylor was going to lose her spot in the program. The scholarship she was counting on fell through, and the payment was due immediately. We didn't have the liquidity, and your father's retirement account has penalties for early withdrawal. So you stole my car instead?" I was beyond furious, my whole body shaking. "How much? How much did you sell my property for?" Dad cleared his throat. "The collector paid $32,000. It was a very fair price considering." considering it was stolen goods? I turned to Taylor, who still hadn't looked up. And you? This was for you? You knew they were selling my car for your tuition? Taylor finally glanced up, a defensive look on her face. I didn't ask them to sell your specific car, okay? I just needed help with tuition. It's not my fault you decided to put all your money into a stupid old car instead of investments like Dad always advised. Something inside me snapped at her dismissive tone. A stupid old car? That stupid old car was my dream. I worked double shifts for years to save for that car. I spent every weekend for a year restoring it. It was mine. Amber, Mom pleaded, we know you're upset, but it's just a car. Family comes first. Taylor needed help. And I didn't deserve a phone call? A discussion? You just took my property and sold it without my permission? We tried to call the hotel, Dad said weakly, but you were in conference sessions. And the payment deadline was. Stop lying. I shouted. You didn't try to call me. You waited until I was out of town so you could sneak behind my back and steal from me. The room fell silent except for my ragged breathing. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating that I could barely stand. These people, my family, had taken the one thing that mattered most to me and sold it without a second thought. Who? I finally asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Who did you sell it to? Dad looked relieved at the calmer question. A collector named James Peterson. He has quite a reputation in classic car circles. He'll take good care. Give me his contact information. Now. Amber, what are you? Now. Dad went to his office and returned with a business card, which I snatched from his hand. I'm going to get my car back, I said, already turning toward the door. And as for the three of you, don't call me. Don't text me. Don't come to my apartment. We're done. Amber, please, Mom sobbed. We're family. I stopped at the door and looked back at them, these people I no longer recognized. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't betray trust. What you did wasn't family. It was theft. And you'll regret it. I promise you that. With those words, I walked out, slamming the door behind me so hard that the stained glass window in its center rattled. In my car, I finally let the tears come, great heaving sobs that left me gasping for air. My Shelby was gone. My family had betrayed me in the worst possible way. But through the tears, determination began to form. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The following days passed in a fog of grief and rage. I called in sick to work, something I'd never done before, and spent 3 days in my apartment alternating between crying jags and fury-fueled planning sessions. The betrayal cut so deep that it physically hurt, a constant ache in my chest that no amount of distraction could ease. On the 4th day, I forced myself to function. I showered, dressed, and began looking for a new place to live. My current apartment was too close to my parents' house, and I couldn't bear the thought of running into them at the grocery store or local coffee shop. Within a week, I'd found a small one-bedroom in Fountain Square, an artsy district on the other side of Indianapolis, and signed a 6-month lease. Moving was cathartic in its way. Each box packed represented another step away from the people who had hurt me. Each item carefully wrapped was a reminder that I could rebuild, that I still had control over some aspects of my life. The Mustang-themed decor I'd collected over the years was the hardest to pack. Each model car and vintage advertisement was a knife to the heart, reminders of Shelby. My colleagues noticed the change in me. Gone was the cheerful, passionate engineer who lit up talking about carburetor designs. In her place was a hollow-eyed automaton who spoke only when necessary and disappeared the moment the workday ended. Amber, what's going on? My boss, Diane, cornered me after a particularly silent team meeting. You've been different since Detroit. Did something happen at the conference? I hadn't told anyone about the car yet. Saying it out loud made it real in a way I wasn't prepared to handle. But Diane's concerned expression broke through my defenses. My family sold my car while I was away, I said flatly. My 1967 Mustang. The one I restored myself. Diane's eyes widened. They sold Shelby? Without asking you? Why would they do that? The fact that she remembered my car's name made my throat tighten. My sister needed tuition money. Apparently, a car I spent years saving for and months restoring was less important than her third attempt at graduate school. Oh, Amber. She reached out as if to hug me, then seemed to think better of it given our professional setting. There aren't words. What are you going to do? I'm going to get her back, I said with more confidence than I felt. Somehow. Diane nodded. Whatever you need, time off, flexible hours, just ask. And if you need someone to help you slash your sister's tires, I've got a mean right foot. The joke, dark as it was, produced my first smile in days. My phone remained conspicuously silent that first week. No calls from Mom, no apologetic texts from Dad, no snarky messages from Taylor. It was as if they were giving me space to get over it, as if this were a minor disagreement about borrowed clothes or forgotten birthdays. Then the social media posts started. Taylor had always been active online, documenting her artistic journey and social life in carefully filtered images. But the posts that appeared after the car sale took on a new, infuriating dimension. There she was at Nordstrom, trying on expensive boots. Treating myself to some retail therapy. #self-care #deserved it. A photo of her at a high-end restaurant, champagne flute raised. Celebrating new beginnings. #masters life #sophistication. A picture of shopping bags from designer stores. Upgrading my wardrobe for grad school. Looking the part is half the journey. #investment pieces. Each post was more enraging than the last. She wasn't just using the car money for tuition, she was splurging on luxury items while the memory of my Shelby faded with each passing day in someone else's garage. It was the final shopping post that broke me. A photo of Taylor posing with a Michael Kors handbag with the caption "Everyone deserves at least one designer bag, right?" #treat yourself. The bag cost nearly $400, I recognized it from ads. That night, I called Devin Murphy, a lawyer friend from college who had helped me with the paperwork when I bought the Mustang. They had no right to sell your property, he confirmed after hearing the story. The car was titled in your name, registered to you, insured by you. This is open and shut theft and conversion of property. So I can get it back? Legally, yes. The sale wasn't valid. But there are complications with the buyer. He purchased in good faith, presumably. He'd have to sue your parents to recover his money, and your parents would be liable for damages to both you and him. I pictured my parents facing legal consequences. Despite everything, the image gave me pause. What if I don't want to involve the courts yet? What if I want to give them a chance to make this right on their own? Devin was quiet for a moment. You could draft a formal demand letter. Lay out the facts, demand full restitution plus damages, and give them a deadline before you pursue legal action. Sometimes that's enough to shock people into doing the right thing. Can you help me write it? I'll do you one better. I'll draft a full contract for repayment. If they sign it, it'll be legally binding. That night, for the first time since discovering the theft, I slept without nightmares. I had a plan now. The car might be gone, but justice was still possible. The next day, I reached out to James Peterson, the collector who had bought my Mustang. His assistant initially tried to brush me off, but I was persistent. Please just tell him Amber Wilson called about the 1967 Mustang Fastback he recently purchased. He'll want to hear what I have to say. 20 minutes later, James himself called back. Ms. Wilson? James Peterson here. My assistant said you wanted to discuss the Mustang? Yes, Mr. Peterson. I'm afraid you've purchased a stolen vehicle. There was a pause. Excuse me? The 1967 Mustang was my car, titled, registered, and insured in my name. My parents sold it without my knowledge or permission while I was out of town. I have all the documentation to prove ownership. Another, longer pause. I see. That's concerning. I purchased the vehicle in good faith, you understand. Your father presented himself as the owner. I understand, and I don't blame you. But the car was not his to sell, and I want it back. James cleared his throat. This puts me in an awkward position. I paid a substantial sum for that vehicle. $32,000, I confirmed. My parents will need to refund you that amount when I pursue legal action, which I'm prepared to do. But I wanted to speak with you directly first, as a fellow car enthusiast. I appreciate that courtesy. His tone had shifted from defensive to thoughtful. Would you be willing to meet in person to discuss this further? Perhaps see the car? My heart leapt at the thought of seeing Shelby again. Yes. Yes, I would. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock? I'll text you the address of my collection garage. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. I had expected resistance, legal threats, dismissal. Instead, James Peterson seemed reasonable, even sympathetic. It was the first glimmer of hope I'd felt in weeks. That Sunday, almost exactly 2 weeks after the discovery of the theft, I received a group text from my mother, family dinner tonight at 6. We need to talk. Please come, Amber. It was time to set my plan in motion. Part 5, the calculated revenge begins. James Peterson's collection garage turned out to be a climate-controlled warehouse on the outskirts of Indianapolis. When I arrived at precisely 2:00 p.m., a security guard checked my ID before directing me to a small office at the front of the building. Inside, a tall man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses stood to greet me. Ms. Wilson? James Peterson. Thank you for coming. We shook hands, his grip firm but not aggressive. He had the confident demeanor of someone accustomed to wealth but not flamboyant about it. His clothes were expensive but understated, his office functional rather than ostentatious. Before we discuss the situation, he said, gesturing to a door behind his desk, would you like to see her? My heart raced. Yes. Please. He led me through the door into a vast space housing at least 30 classic cars, each more stunning than the last. Porsches, Jaguars, Aston Martins, a collection worth millions. But I had eyes for only one vehicle, the Highland Green Mustang positioned under perfect lighting near the center of the room. Shelby, I whispered, moving toward her as if in a trance. You named her Shelby, James noted, following behind me. After Carol Shelby, I presume? I nodded, running my hand along her perfect finish. She looks exactly the same. I haven't made any modifications. She's a beautiful restoration job. You did this yourself? Every part one could. Some specialized work had to be outsourced, but I did the engine rebuild personally. James whistled appreciatively. That's impressive. Not many people with your level of expertise around these days, especially not women? I finished, used to the surprise. Young people, he corrected. The art of proper restoration is becoming rare in any gender. I spent several minutes checking over every inch of my car, relieved to find her exactly as I'd left her. James watched silently, a thoughtful expression on his face. Your parents didn't mention that the car belonged to their daughter, he finally said. Your father presented the title as his own, said he was downsizing his collection. Had I known, would it have made a difference? I asked, genuinely curious. James considered this. I'd like to think so. I build my business on reputation and trust. I don't deal in questionable property. I have all the documentation, I said, opening my portfolio. The original purchase receipt, insurance in my name, maintenance records, parts receipts, everything showing I'm the rightful owner. He examined the papers carefully. These seem in order. May I make copies for my attorney? After copying my documents, we returned to his office, where James surprised me with an unexpected proposition. Ms. Wilson, I understand you want your car back, and legally you have a strong case. But rather than jumping immediately to litigation, which could get messy for all parties involved, might I suggest an alternative approach? I'm listening. Your parents and sister are the ones who wronged you. They should be the ones to make restitution. He leaned forward. What if you pursued repayment from them, and in the meantime, I keep the car safe here in my collection? You would have visitation rights, of course. Visitation rights? To my own car? Until the situation is resolved. Think of it as motivation for your family to make things right. Once they've repaid you the full value of the car, we can revisit the ownership discussion. I considered his proposal. It wasn't perfect, I wanted Shelby back immediately, but it had strategic advantages. The car would remain safe and well-maintained, and my family would still face consequences. And if they refused to pay? Then we reevaluate our options. I'm not unsympathetic to your situation, Ms. Wilson. I collect cars because each one has a story, a soul. Your Mustang story isn't finished yet. That afternoon, I left James Peterson's warehouse with renewed purpose and Devin Murphy's meticulously drafted contract in my bag. The document demanded repayment of $35,000, the $32,000 sale price plus $3,000 in damages for emotional distress, with specified monthly payments over 2 years. The terms were strict but not impossible, with severe penalties for default. By 5:45 p.m., I was parked outside my parents' house, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. The familiar Sunday dinner setup was visible through the dining room window: Mom's good china, Dad's favorite wine glasses, the centerpiece of fresh flowers. As if everything were normal. As if they hadn't destroyed my trust 2 weeks ago. I walked in without knocking, the contract tucked under my arm. They were all in the dining room, Mom fussing with place settings, Dad opening wine, Taylor texting on her phone. They looked up in unison when I entered, expressions ranging from hopeful, Mom, to wary, Dad, to annoyed, Taylor. Amber. Mom moved as if to hug me, then stopped when she saw my face. We're so glad you came. I'm not staying for dinner, I said coldly, remaining in the doorway. I'm here to discuss repayment. Dad set down the wine bottle. Repayment? Honey, we know you're upset about the car. Upset? I laughed bitterly. That doesn't begin to cover it. You stole from me. You betrayed my trust. You took something irreplaceable and sold it to a stranger. We had no choice, Mom pleaded. Taylor's tuition was not my responsibility, I interrupted. And apparently not that urgent either, given Taylor's recent shopping sprees. All eyes turned to Taylor, who had the grace to flush slightly. That's my business, she muttered. What I do with my money. It wasn't your money. I slammed the contract down on the table, making the silverware jump. It was my money. My car. And now you're going to pay me back. Every single cent. Dad reached for the contract, adjusting his reading glasses. What is this? A legally binding repayment agreement. $35,000, payable in monthly installments over 2 years. $35,000? Dad looked up sharply. The car sold for $32,000. Plus damages. Consider the extra $3,000 a family discount on what a court would award me for theft and emotional distress. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Court? Amber, you wouldn't sue your own family. Try me. Taylor, who had been unusually quiet, finally exploded. This is ridiculous. It was just a car. A stupid old car that you were weirdly obsessed with. Normal people don't act like this over objects. I fixed her with an icy stare. That stupid old car represented 5 years of my life. 5 years of double shifts and ramen dinners and saying no to vacations with friends. 5 years of hard work that you've never had to do because Mom and Dad have always bailed you out. That's not fair, she protested. Life isn't fair. But this contract is. You needed money, so you took mine. Now you're going to pay it back. Dad was flipping through the pages, his accountant's mind processing the terms. These payments would be nearly $700 a month. Yes. Coincidentally about what I paid monthly while saving for the car. Funny how that works out. This is insane, Taylor said, standing up. I'm not signing this. Then I'll see you in court. All of you. I looked each of them in the eye. I've already spoken with the buyer, Mr. Peterson. He's aware the sale was fraudulent. I have all the documentation proving the car was mine alone. The police report for theft has been filed but not yet processed. I wanted to give you this one chance to make it right. The mention of a police report sucked all the air out of the room. Dad's face paled, and Mom began to cry quietly. Taylor looked to them for support, but for once, none was forthcoming. You wouldn't really press charges, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. I already have. The detective just needs my go-ahead to move forward. Sign the contract, and I'll tell them it was a misunderstanding. Refuse, and I'll see this through to the end, whatever it takes. The transformation in my family's faces was remarkable, from righteous indignation to dawning horror as they realized I wasn't bluffing. I'd changed in these 2 weeks. The dutiful daughter who had always played by the rules, who had never wanted to rock the boat, was gone. In her place stood someone they didn't recognize, someone who would not back down. I'll give you until tomorrow to decide, I said, turning to leave. My lawyer's contact information is on the last page. Amber, wait, Mom called desperately. Please, stay. We can talk about this. I paused at the door. There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice when you sold my car behind my back. Now it's your turn to live with consequences. As I walked out to my car, I heard raised voices behind me, Taylor's high-pitched protests, Dad's measured tones, Mom's tearful pleas. I drove away without looking back, my hands steady on the wheel despite the emotional storm inside me. The revenge I had set in motion wasn't about cruelty or getting even. It was about justice, about standing up for myself after a lifetime of putting others first. For the first time in weeks, the ache in my chest had eased slightly, replaced by a newfound sense of power. They had taken Shelby from me. The first sign that Taylor wouldn't take the contract seriously came 3 days later in the form of a text message. This is all going to blow over once you calm down. Stop being dramatic. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to Devin and asked him to proceed with the next step. The following day, Taylor received a formal legal notice reiterating the terms of the contract and the consequences of noncompliance. No more family text messages, no more emotional pleas, just the cold, hard language of the law. That got her attention. She called me 17 times in 1 hour. I let each call go to voicemail, listening to her messages evolve from angry, "You're being completely unreasonable," to panicked, "You need to call off your attack dog lawyer right now," to finally, grudgingly concerned, "Okay, maybe we need to talk about this." Only when she texted "Fine, let's discuss the contract" did I respond with a time and place. A coffee shop downtown, neutral territory away from family drama. I arrived early, positioning myself at a corner table with clear sight lines to the door, the contract and my laptop arranged precisely before me. Devin had advised me to project confidence and control during any negotiation. Taylor arrived 15 minutes late, her hair in a messy bun, wearing designer sunglasses despite the cloudy day. She slid into the seat across from me with a performative sigh. "You're really doing this," she said, not quite a question. "I am. Mom and Dad think you've lost your mind. What they think doesn't concern me. Are you ready to discuss repayment terms?" She pushed her sunglasses up into her hair, revealing eyes ringed with shadows. "I don't have that kind of money, Amber. You know that. You had enough for the Michael Kors bag. And the Nordstrom boots. And the champagne dinner at St. Elmo's." Her cheeks flushed. "That's different. Those were essentials? I supplied. Necessities? The way my car was to me? Taylor fell silent, picking at the cardboard sleeve on her coffee cup. The terms are straightforward, I continued. $700 per month for 24 months, with a balloon payment at the end for any remaining balance plus accrued interest. And if I don't pay? Then I proceed with the police report and the civil suit. Your credit gets ruined, and you'll have a theft case following you around every time you apply for a job or an apartment. She stared at me, searching for any sign of the sister who used to let her borrow clothes, who helped her with college application essays, who defended her against high school bullies. That sister was nowhere to be found. This isn't you, she finally said. You've never been this cold. You're right. This isn't me. This is who I've become after being betrayed by the people I trusted most. Taylor left the coffee shop without signing anything, but the fear in her eyes told me she finally understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't going to blow over. This wasn't a sisterly spat that would be forgotten by Christmas. This was war. The following week brought my parents into the conflict directly. Dad called my office, knowing I couldn't easily ignore a work call. We need to meet with you, he said without preamble when I answered. All of us, including Taylor. We're thinking of family therapy. I'm not interested in therapy, I replied coolly. I'm interested in repayment. Amber, this situation is tearing the family apart. Your mother can barely eat. She cries every night. The guilt trip might have worked on the old Amber. The new Amber recognized it as manipulation. That's unfortunate, but it's the consequence of your actions, not mine. Dad's voice hardened. We raised you better than this. Family helps family. Exactly. You should have helped me by respecting my property instead of stealing from me. He sighed deeply. Fine. We'll come to your terms. But we want one family therapy session first. If you still want to pursue this afterward, we won't stop you. I considered this. One session wouldn't delay my legal timeline significantly, and it might help to have a neutral third-party witness their admission of wrongdoing. One session, I agreed. But I'm selecting the therapist, and I'm bringing my documentation. We met the following Saturday at the office of Dr. Lydia Washington, a family therapist recommended by Devon for her no-nonsense approach. My parents arrived together, tension evident in their rigid postures. Taylor slunk in 5 minutes late, eyes fixed on her phone. I brought a folder containing all my car documentation, the police report, and the contract. Dr. Washington began by establishing ground rules: no interrupting, no personal attacks, everyone gets equal time. She then asked each of us to describe the situation from our perspective. Dad went first, framing the car sale as an unfortunate but necessary decision made under duress. Taylor's tuition was due, and she would have lost her spot in the program. We had to act quickly. We always intended to make it up to Amber somehow. Mom followed with a tearful account of her distress over the family conflict. We're supposed to be there for each other. I understand Amber's upset, but taking legal action against her own family is extreme. Taylor's turn was predictably defensive. Everyone's acting like I forced them to sell the car. I just told them about my tuition problem. What they did was their decision, so I don't see why I should be financially punished for it. When my turn came, I opened my folder and methodically laid out the evidence. The title in my name, the insurance documents, the maintenance records, photos of the restoration process, and finally, a spreadsheet detailing every dollar and hour I'd invested in the car. This was not a family asset, I concluded. This was my personal property, purchased with my money, maintained with my money, registered and insured in my name. Its sale without my consent was theft, legally and morally. The fact that the thieves are related to me doesn't change that fact. Dr. Washington nodded thoughtfully. I hear a lot of pain in this room. Amber feels violated and betrayed. The rest of the family feels Amber's response is disproportionate to what they view as a necessary family decision. She turned to my parents. But I have to ask, did you consult Amber before selling her car? Dad shifted uncomfortably. We tried to call her hotel. That's not what I asked, Dr. Washington interrupted gently. Did you speak with Amber and get her consent? No, Dad admitted reluctantly. And did you know the car was titled in her name only? Another pause. Yes. Dr. Washington turned to Taylor. And the tuition money, has it been paid to your school? Taylor blinked, caught off guard by the direct question. Most of it. Most of it? The first semester's payment. And some other expenses. What other expenses? Taylor glanced at our parents, who suddenly seemed very interested in the office decor. Just things I needed for school. Supplies and stuff. I pulled up Instagram on my phone and handed it to Dr. Washington. Here are Taylor's school supplies. The therapist scrolled through the shopping posts, her expression neutral but her silence damning. When she handed the phone back, the atmosphere in the room had shifted perceptibly. It seems to me, Dr. Washington said carefully, that we have a clear case of boundaries being violated. Amber's property was taken without her consent, and the money was not used solely for the emergency purpose claimed. She looked at each of my family members in turn. In my professional opinion, making amends requires both acknowledgement of wrongdoing and concrete actions to repair the damage. Amber's request for repayment seems reasonable given the circumstances. Mom started crying again. Dad looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Taylor stared at the floor, her earlier defiance deflated. But she's talking about police and courts and lawsuits, Mom protested. Against her own family. Those are the legal remedies available to someone whose property has been taken, Dr. Washington replied matter-of-factly. Amber is setting a clear boundary by pursuing these options if repayment isn't made. The session continued for another 30 minutes, but the essential dynamic had been established. Even a neutral third party could see that I was the wronged party, that my demands were reasonable, and that my family's resistance was based more on entitlement than any genuine financial hardship. As we were leaving, Dr. Washington pulled me aside briefly. Setting boundaries with family is one of the hardest things to do, she said quietly. But it's also one of the most necessary for healthy relationships. Stand your ground. That evening, Dad called with a counterproposal. He and Mom would take out a home equity loan to repay me immediately, and Taylor would repay them over time at a lower interest rate. We just want this over with, he said wearily. Your mother can't take the stress, and frankly, neither can I. The money was never the only issue, I replied. It's about accountability. Taylor needs to understand that actions have consequences. She's our daughter too, Amber. We're trying to protect her. That's exactly the problem. You've been protecting her from consequences her entire life. Look where that's gotten her, 27 years old and still expecting bailouts. Dad was silent for a long moment. What exactly do you want from us? I want Taylor to sign the contract and make the payments herself. I want her to feel the weight of what she did every month when that money leaves her account. I want her to learn what it means to work for something instead of having it handed to her. And if we refuse? Then I'll see you in court. The next day, my boss Diane called me into her office. Her expression was grim as she closed the door behind me. Your sister called the company this morning, she said without preamble. She was trying to reach you, but she ended up speaking with HR instead. She made some concerning allegations. My stomach dropped. What kind of allegations? She claimed you're having a mental health crisis, that you're making irrational threats against your family, and that the company should be concerned about your stability. Diane held up a hand as I started to protest. I shut it down immediately. I told HR I work directly with you every day and have observed no concerning behaviors. But Amber, you need to know, this is escalating in ways that could affect your professional reputation. The fury that washed over me was unlike anything I'd felt before. Taylor had crossed a line I didn't even know existed. Stealing my car was one thing, trying to sabotage my career was another entirely. I left work early that day and drove straight to James Peterson's warehouse. I needed to see Shelby, to remind myself what I was fighting for. When I arrived, James's assistant led me not to the main collection floor but to a small workshop in the back. There, to my surprise, was James himself, sleeves rolled up, carefully polishing my Mustang's chrome trim. "Ms. Wilson," he said, straightening up. "I wasn't expecting you today. I'm sorry to drop in unannounced. I just needed to see her." James nodded understandingly. "She has that effect. I find myself coming back to her more often than my other cars." He gestured to a workbench with 2 stools. "Would you like something to drink? I keep a small refrigerator in here." Over bottles of water, I found myself telling James about the escalating situation with my family, the therapy session, Taylor's call to my workplace, my parents' attempt to shield her from responsibility. Family conflicts around inheritance or valuable possessions are unfortunately common in my experience, he said when I finished. Though usually they occur after someone has died, not when all parties are still very much alive to fight it out. I never expected this from them, I admitted. I knew we had our differences, but this level of betrayal? And now Taylor trying to sabotage my job? James was quiet for a moment, contemplating the car. "You know, I've been collecting classic cars for over 20 years. In that time, I've learned something important: a car's value isn't just in its make or model or condition. It's in its story." He ran a hand along Shelby's fender. "This car's story is still being written. And so is yours." That simple observation, delivered without judgment or advice, somehow steadied me. The story wasn't over. And I would make sure it had the right ending. The next morning, I received a text from my father: "We're ready to discuss the contract terms. Taylor will sign." James Peterson's offer to let me visit Shelby became my emotional lifeline during those turbulent weeks. Every Saturday morning, I'd arrive at his warehouse with coffee for us both, and he'd give me space to spend time with my car. Sometimes I'd just sit in the driver's seat, inhaling the familiar scent of leather and motor oil. Other times I'd polish her chrome or check her fluid levels, unnecessary tasks given James's meticulous care, but comforting in their familiarity. During these visits, I learned more about James himself. He wasn't just a wealthy collector who bought cars as status symbols, he was a passionate preservationist with an encyclopedic knowledge of automotive history. Each car in his collection had been carefully researched and restored to its authentic condition. He didn't just own these vehicles, he understood them, respected them, loved them. "My wife thinks I'm a bit mad," he confessed one morning as we sat drinking coffee beside the Mustang. "Spending all this time with inanimate objects, as she calls them." "They're not just objects," I replied automatically. "Exactly." He smiled. "Each one has a soul, don't they? A history. The hands that built them, the people who drove them, the journeys they've taken." It was during one of these Saturday sessions that I received the call that would change everything. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was local, so I answered. "Is this Amber Wilson?" A woman's voice, professionally pleasant. "Yes, this is she. Ms. Wilson, this is Deborah Ackerman from the Harrington Scholarship Committee at Indianapolis Metropolitan University. I'm calling because we've received some concerning information regarding one of our recipients, Taylor Wilson." "I understand she's your sister?" My pulse quickened. "Yes, she is." "What kind of concerning information?" "We've received documentation suggesting that Ms. Wilson provided false information on her scholarship application. Specifically, regarding her financial need and family contributions." A slight pause. "The documentation appears to have come from you." "I hadn't sent anything to any scholarship committee." "I'm sorry, but I didn't submit any documentation to your organization. The materials came from a James Peterson, who indicated he was acting on your behalf with your knowledge." I turned slowly to look at James, who was suddenly very interested in adjusting Shelby's side mirror. "I see," I said carefully. "May I ask what specific information was provided?" Police reports regarding the sale of a vehicle to pay for tuition, family therapy records, and social media posts showing expenditures inconsistent with claimed financial hardship. Another pause. Ms. Wilson, scholarship funds are limited and awarded based on both merit and need. If a student has misrepresented their situation. I understand, I said. What happens now? The committee will be reviewing Taylor's scholarship status. She has been notified and given an opportunity to respond. I'm calling you as the apparent source of the information to verify its authenticity. After the call ended, I turned to James with raised eyebrows. You went behind my back, I said, not sure whether to be angry or impressed. He had the grace to look slightly abashed. I may have taken a small liberty, yes. Why? Because I've seen this story before. Family takes advantage of the responsible one fights back, family closes ranks to protect the irresponsible one. Without external pressure, the cycle continues. He shrugged. I simply introduced some external pressure. I should have been furious at his interference. Instead, I felt an odd sense of relief. For so long, I'd been fighting this battle alone. Having an ally, even one I barely knew, made the burden lighter somehow. The repercussions came swiftly. Taylor called that afternoon, her voice shrill with panic. What did you do? The scholarship committee is threatening to revoke my funding and make me pay back what I've already received. They're talking about academic dishonesty charges. I didn't do anything, I replied truthfully. But it sounds like your actions are catching up with you. You have to fix this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Was it a misunderstanding, Taylor? Did you or did you not claim financial hardship while spending thousands on designer clothes and restaurants? Her silence was answer enough. I can't fix this for you, I said finally. But I can tell you that taking responsibility, real responsibility, might be a good place to start. The next blow came 3 days later when Taylor lost her part-time job at the gallery. The owner, a friend of James Peterson as it turned out, had decided to restructure and eliminate her position. With her scholarship in jeopardy and no income, Taylor's carefully constructed world began to crumble. My parents were next to reach out, their tone markedly different from our previous interactions. This has gone far enough, Dad said when I answered his call. Taylor's scholarship is under review, she's lost her job, and she's having anxiety attacks. Whatever point you were trying to make, you've made it. I understand you're concerned about Taylor, I replied evenly, but I didn't initiate the scholarship review. That was the consequence of her own misrepresentations. Be that as it may, we need to resolve this situation before it gets worse. Your mother and I have decided to take out a loan to repay you in full, immediately. We'll handle Taylor's portion ourselves. That's not what I asked for. The contract. To hell with the contract. Dad's composure finally cracked. This is our family we're talking about. Your sister's future. Your mother's health. Is your revenge worth destroying everything? His words hit home harder than he knew. Was it worth it? The fractured relationships, the escalating hostilities, the collateral damage to people I still loved despite everything? Before I could respond, he continued in a calmer voice. Just tell us what you really want, Amber. Not the legal terms or the payment schedules. What do you actually want to come from all this? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? The car back, obviously. But beyond that? I want accountability, I said slowly. I want Taylor to understand that actions have consequences. I want you and Mom to recognize that enabling her isn't helping her. I want our family to be based on mutual respect, not just blood obligation. Dad was quiet for a moment. Those are reasonable wants, he finally said. But is this legal battle the only way to achieve them? That evening, I received a surprising text from Taylor. Can we meet? Just us. No lawyers, no parents, no contracts. Please. We agreed to meet at a park near my new apartment. Neutral ground with plenty of open space and witnesses, as Devon had advised. I arrived early, claiming a bench with good sightlines and minimal blind spots. My lawyer friend had made me paranoid about ambushes, physical or emotional. Taylor arrived on time for once, looking different than I'd ever seen her. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. Instead, she wore jeans and a plain sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup. She looked younger, more vulnerable, and eerily like photos of me at her age. She sat beside me without speaking, both of us watching a group of children playing on the nearby playground. The silence stretched between us, not exactly comfortable but not hostile either. "I lost my scholarship," she finally said. "And my apartment. The rent's due next week, and I don't have it." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, meaning it despite everything. "What will you do?" She let out a bitter laugh. "What I should have done from the beginning. Get a real job. Move somewhere cheaper. Take fewer classes per semester so I can work more hours." She glanced at me. "Basically, do what you did. What you tried to tell me to do for years." The admission was so unexpected that I wasn't sure how to respond. "I was jealous of you," she continued. "Did you know that? Everyone always talked about how responsible and hardworking Amber was. How Amber never asked for handouts. How Amber built her own success." She picked at a loose thread on her jeans. "It was easier to call you boring or obsessive than to admit you were just better at being an adult than I was." "Taylor." "No, let me finish. When Mom and Dad sold your car, I knew it was wrong. I knew how much it meant to you. But I was desperate for that tuition money, and it was easier to let them do it than to face the consequences of my own bad decisions." She took a shaky breath. "I've been thinking about what you said. About wanting accountability. You were right. I need to take responsibility for once in my life." She pulled a folded document from her pocket and handed it to me. It was the original contract I drafted with Devon, signed on the last page in her flowing handwriting. "I can't pay it all at once," she said. "But I'll make the monthly payments as agreed. I've applied for 3 full-time jobs, and I'm moving in with a roommate in a cheaper apartment. I've also sold most of the stuff I bought." She gave a rueful smile. "Turns out designer items don't hold their value very well." I stared at the signed contract, then at my sister's face, earnest, anxious, and showing the first real maturity I'd seen from her in years. "Why the change of heart?" I asked. "Because losing everything made me realize what actually matters. Not the stuff or the status, but the people who've always been there for me. Including you." She wiped at her eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. Or ever, maybe. But I want to try to make things right." That night, I called James Peterson with a proposition of my own. "I'd like to buy Shelby back," I said without preamble. There was a pause on the line. "I see. May I ask what prompted this decision?" I told him about my meeting with Taylor, the signed contract, her apparent transformation. "The point wasn't to punish her forever," I explained. "It was to teach her responsibility. And I think maybe that lesson has started to take." "And what about your parents?" "That's more complicated. But I'm willing to work on it, as long as they respect my boundaries going forward." James was quiet for a moment. "The car is worth considerably more than I paid for it," he finally said. "As I'm sure you know." My heart sank. I couldn't afford to buy Shelby back at market value. "I understand. I can keep making visitation." "I'll sell her back to you for $24,000, he interrupted. $8,000 less than I paid your parents." "Why would you do that?" "Because some things are worth more than money, Ms. Wilson. The right ending to a story, for instance." 2 weeks later, Taylor made her first payment, $700 transferred directly to my account. She'd gotten a job as an administrative assistant at a law firm, ironically one that specialized in property disputes. The position was full-time, which meant she'd dropped to part-time student status, extending her master's program by at least a year. "It's actually better this way," she told me over coffee, our new weekly ritual. "I'm learning more because I'm not rushing through the material. And working at a law firm is giving me a whole new perspective on my art history focus. There's a lot about property rights and provenance that overlaps." With her first payment, I made a down payment on a 1965 Mustang coupe, not as rare as my fastback, but a solid project car that needed extensive restoration. James introduced me to his network of parts suppliers and specialty mechanics, becoming a mentor of sorts in the restoration process. My parents remained cautious around me, our relationship cordial but strained. They'd respected my request that Taylor make her own payments, though I knew they were helping her with living expenses to make it possible. It would take time to rebuild trust, but the foundation was there. 1 year after the car theft, Taylor had repaid nearly half of the money. She'd maintained her full-time job, continued her part-time studies, and even started building her own modest savings account. The transformation wasn't just financial. She carried herself differently, spoke more thoughtfully, and had developed a new appreciation for delayed gratification. The culmination of this year of change came on a warm Saturday in April, when Taylor showed up at my garage unexpectedly. "I brought lunch," she said, holding up a bag from our favorite deli. "And I thought maybe, if you wanted, I could help with the car today?" I hesitated only briefly before handing her a pair of work gloves. "We're replacing the door panels. Think you can handle it?" Her smile was answer enough. As we worked side by side on my new project car, I reflected on the journey of the past year. I hadn't gotten exactly what I wanted. The original Shelby was still in James's collection, though he'd given me first right of refusal should he ever decide to sell. But I'd gotten something perhaps more valuable: self-respect, stronger boundaries, and a sister who was finally growing into the person she could be. The car that had come between us had ultimately brought us back together, changed but intact, like a restoration that honors the original while creating something new. 18 months after my parents sold my dream car, Taylor made her final payment. She'd maintained her commitment religiously, some months requiring overtime work or selling personal items to make the deadline, but never once asking our parents for the money. When the final $700 transfer appeared in my account, I texted her a simple message: "Payment received. Contract fulfilled." Her reply came moments later: "Can we meet? I have something for you." We arranged to meet at my garage, where my '65 Mustang restoration was nearing completion. The car had become a weekend project for both of us, Taylor proving surprisingly adept at the more detailed interior work, her artist's hand steady with the delicate tasks of rewiring and upholstery. When she arrived, she carried a small gift bag and wore an expression of nervous anticipation. "So that's it?" she asked, glancing at her phone where my text was displayed. "We're square?" "Financially, yes," I confirmed, wiping grease from my hands with a shop rag. "The contract is satisfied." She nodded, then handed me the gift bag. I wanted to mark the occasion. Inside was a small velvet box. I opened it to find a keychain, sterling silver with a miniature Mustang charm and an engraved plate that read, "Drive like you stole it. Love, T." The dark humor was so unexpected, so perfectly inappropriate, that I burst out laughing. Taylor joined in, the tension between us dissolving in a moment of genuine shared mirth. "Too soon?" she asked, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. "Maybe a little," I admitted, still chuckling. "But I love it." That keychain became my talisman, a reminder of how far we'd come from the depths of betrayal and rage. It jangled against my keys as I drove my restored '65 Mustang, now painted vintage burgundy rather than Highland green, different from Shelby, but beautiful in her own right. I named her Phoenix, for obvious reasons. My relationship with my parents took longer to repair. The first tentative steps came during the holidays, 6 months into Taylor's repayment plan. Mom had called, her voice hesitant, asking if I'd consider joining them for Christmas dinner. "Just dinner," she'd emphasized. "No pressure for anything more." I'd agreed with conditions, no gifts, still too complicated emotionally, and no pretending the car situation hadn't happened. They'd accepted my terms, resulting in a Christmas dinner that was stiff and awkward but at least civil, a starting point for whatever might come next. From there, we rebuilt slowly. Monthly family dinners. Occasional phone calls. Dad helping me track down a rare carburetor for Phoenix. Mom sending care packages to my new apartment. Small gestures that acknowledged my independence while reaffirming our connection. During this time, James Peterson remained a steadfast presence in my life, evolving from unexpected ally to valued mentor and friend. Every few months, he'd invite me to his warehouse to see Shelby, my original Mustang, and update me on her maintenance. "She's still yours in spirit," he'd say. "I'm just her caretaker for now." A year and a half after selling her to me at a discount, James invited me to his office after one of my regular visits. He seemed unusually formal as he gestured for me to sit across from his desk. "Ms. Wilson, Amber, I have a proposition for you," he began, straightening an already straight stack of papers. "As you know, I've been considering scaling back my collection. My wife and I are spending more time at our place in Arizona, and maintaining the full collection here in Indianapolis is becoming impractical." My heart beat faster. Was he about to offer Shelby back to me? "I've decided to sell approximately 1/3 of my cars," he continued. "And I wanted to discuss Shelby's future with you first." "Are you offering to sell her back to me?" I asked directly, hope rising despite my attempt to stay measured. "Not exactly." He smiled. "I'm offering you a trade." "A trade?" "Your Phoenix for my Shelby." "Even exchange?" I blinked, confused. "But that's not even close to a fair trade. Shelby's worth at least twice what Phoenix is, even after all the restoration work." James waved away my concern. "Fair market value isn't everything, Amber. Some cars belong with certain people. Shelby belongs with you. She always has." He leaned forward. "Besides, I've grown rather fond of that vintage burgundy coupe of yours. There's something special about a car that's been brought back from the brink, wouldn't you agree?" 2 weeks later, after the paperwork was complete and the insurance transferred, I drove Shelby home for the first time. The feeling of her steering wheel under my hands was both achingly familiar and startlingly new, like reconnecting with a childhood friend as an adult, recognizing the core essence while acknowledging the changes time had wrought. I pulled into my parents' driveway unannounced, heart pounding as I cut the engine. The distinctive rumble of the Mustang brought them both to the front door, expressions of confusion turning to shock as they recognized the car. "Is that?" Mom couldn't even finish the sentence. "It is," I confirmed, patting Shelby's hood affectionately. "She's back where she belongs." Dad approached slowly, as if the car might disappear if he moved too quickly. "How?" "James Peterson. He's been planning this for a while, I think." I held out the keys. "Want to take her for a spin? Properly this time, with permission?" The drive around the neighborhood with my father was quiet, heavy with unspoken emotions. When we returned to the house, he turned to me with eyes suspiciously bright. "I'm sorry, Amber. What I did, was inexcusable. Not just selling the car, but dismissing what it meant to you." He gripped the steering wheel as if it were a lifeline. "I've spent my whole life trying to teach you girls about responsibility and respect, and then I failed at both in the worst possible way. It took me a long time to understand why it hurt so much," I admitted. "It wasn't just losing Shelby. It was feeling like my autonomy didn't matter to the people who raised me to be independent." Dad nodded, the simple gesture conveying more understanding than all our previous conversations combined. That evening, Taylor came over to see Shelby, running her hand along the car's sleek lines with newfound appreciation. "She really is beautiful," my sister acknowledged. "I didn't get it before, why a car could mean so much. But after working on Phoenix with you, I think I understand now. It's not just about the car," I explained. "It's what it represents. The work, the sacrifice, the achievement. Like my master's degree, Taylor mused. Now that I'm actually earning it myself, working full-time, paying my own way, it means something different. It's mine in a way it wouldn't have been otherwise. The following weekend, Taylor helped me detail Shelby from headlights to tailpipe, a gesture of reconciliation more meaningful than any words could have been. As we worked, she updated me on her life, the promotion at the law firm, her plans to specialize in art provenance law, the modest apartment she now shared with a responsible roommate. I might even start saving for my own classic car, she admitted with a self-deprecating smile. Something small to begin with. Maybe an old Volkswagen Beetle. I could help you restore it, I offered. If you wanted. The smile that bloomed on her face was worth every difficult moment of the past 2 years. 1 year to the day after Shelby returned to me, I hosted a small gathering in my garage, my parents, Taylor, James Peterson and his wife, Devin Murphy, my boss Diane, and a few close friends who had supported me through the ordeal. We toasted with champagne, non-alcoholic for those driving, as I unveiled the custom license plate I'd ordered for Shelby, LSSNSLRND. To lessons learned, I said, raising my glass. About cars, about family, about standing up for yourself, and about second chances. And to Amber, James added, who taught all of us something about the true value of things, and people. Later that evening, as the gathering wound down, Taylor pulled me aside, her expression serious. I need to thank you, she said quietly. For what? Letting you help with the cars? She shook her head. For not letting me off the hook. For making me face the consequences. She glanced around at the small party, at our parents chatting with James, at the life we were all rebuilding. I didn't see it then, but it was the kindest thing anyone's ever done for me. You cared enough to make me do better. I hugged my sister tightly, feeling the last of my resentment dissolve. That's what family is supposed to do. Not enable, not excuse, but care enough to expect the best from each other. As our guests departed and twilight settled over the garage, I sat alone in Shelby's driver's seat, reflecting on the journey of the past 2 years. The car that had been taken from me had ultimately given me something far more valuable, the courage to stand up for myself, to demand respect, to set boundaries even with those I loved. The road ahead would still have its bumps and curves, family relationships always do, but I was driving with my eyes wide open now, hands firmly on the wheel, in control of my own journey. And that, more than any car, was the dream worth fighting for. Life's biggest lessons often come from our most painful experiences. Has someone in your life ever taken something precious from you? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below to share your story. Your words might help someone else navigating a similar situation. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for